My name is Daniel Miller, and I thought I had everything under control. I was 29, a senior strategist in a busy New York marketing firm. On the surface, I looked like the type of person who could handle pressure. I carried myself with confidence, lived in a fast-paced city, and built a career where deadlines came faster than sleep. But on an ordinary Tuesday morning, everything I believed about my strength collapsed in an instant. I was standing in front of the boardroom delivering projections I had rehearsed for weeks. My slides glowed across the screen. Executives leaned forward with sharp pens ready to judge every word. My heart pounded in rhythm with the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. For 15 minutes, I fought to steady my voice, to keep control of the room. Then it hit. A piercing pain shot through my skull so suddenly it stole my breath. The faces in front of me blurred like watercolors left in the rain. My hand reached for the table, my voice slurred mid-sentence, and then nothing but darkness swallowed me whole. When I opened my eyes, I was in a sterile white room. Machines beeped beside me, tubes ran into my arm, and the air smelled faintly of antiseptic. A doctor appeared with a clipboard speaking in a calm voice that made my stomach turn. They had called my emergency contacts my parents. He hesitated, his eyes drifting away. They said they would come, but they never arrived. Silence filled the room, heavier than any painkiller could dull. My own parents, the people I thought would be there in my worst moment, had chosen absence. It was not distance. It was not confusion. It was a decision. And it cut deeper than the IV needle in my arm. I wish I could tell you that was the first time I felt invisible, but the truth is, this abandonment was just the climax of a story written long before. Years of being measured against someone else, years of being the shadow in my own family portrait had prepared me for this. But nothing prepares you for lying in a hospital bed, realizing that when your body failed, you, the people who raised you, failed as well. Before I continue, let me ask you something. If you have ever felt unseen by the people who should love you most, you will understand my story in a way statistics never can. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, I invite you to stay subscribed and share your thoughts as we uncover what family really means. That day, as I stared at the ceiling tiles, I understood that collapse was not only physical. It was the collapse of an illusion, that blood alone guarantees loyalty, that family by name means family by choice. From that moment on, my journey was no longer about recovery from fainting in a boardroom. It became a battle to redefine what family truly is, and to discover if freedom from old wounds could be stronger than the scars left behind. I remember lying in that hospital bed, the beeping machines, a cruel reminder that I was still here, still alive, yet completely abandoned. The doctor had just left when the weight of it all pressed down. My parents knew I had collapsed. They knew I was in the hospital, and still they had chosen not to come. At first I tried to make excuses for them. Maybe they were busy. Maybe they didn't realize how serious it was. But deep down, I already knew the truth. They never came because I was never the child worth showing up for. Growing up, my family looked like perfection on the outside. In Christmas photos, we were the smiling, well-dressed suburban family. My father, Robert Miller, was a respected architect. My mother, Elaine, taught third grade and had a reputation for kindness that made other parents admire her. My sister, Caroline, 3 years older than me, was the golden child who outshined everything I did. From the outside, we were flawless, but inside our home, I felt invisible. When Caroline won first place at the science fair, my father praised her project as if it were groundbreaking research. I brought home a second-place ribbon in debate, and he barely glanced at it. "You should try harder, Daniel," he would say, his eyes already back on my sister. My mother echoed it too, reminding teachers at conferences that my sister never had such problems, and that I just needed to apply myself more. It wasn't that I was failing. I had a GPA above 3.8 in high school. I joined the debate club. I volunteered at the animal shelter. I worked for everything I had. But compared to Caroline's 4.0, her presidency in student council, and her acceptance to Princeton, my achievements were treated like shadows on the wall, present but unnoticed. I can still remember my 16th birthday. My parents drove 6 hours to help Caroline prepare for her sorority formal that same weekend. I was left with a store-bought cake on the kitchen counter and a short note promising we'd celebrate next week. We never did. That moment stuck with me like a scar. Birthdays were supposed to matter. Instead, mine was disposable. By the time I graduated high school, I no longer expected applause from them. They showed up for the ceremony, sure, but the dinner afterward was consumed with excitement over Caroline's engagement to a wealthy law student. My acceptance letter to Northwestern got a passing nod. "It's not Princeton, but it's good," my father had said flatly. That one sentence told me everything. It was then that I made my decision. If I was never going to be more than second best, then I needed to get out. Chicago became my escape, a city far from Boston, far from the comparisons, far from being a footnote in my own family story. I told myself distance would heal me, that maybe they would notice my absence and finally realize what I was worth. But years passed and the calls grew shorter, the visits less frequent. And with every silence, I accepted the truth a little more. Sitting in that hospital room years later, I realized the collapse had not just been from exhaustion. It was the physical embodiment of a lifetime of carrying invisible weight. The weight of being overlooked, the weight of pretending I was fine, the weight of always asking myself why I was never enough. And yet, as much as the truth burned, I also felt something else that night, an ember of freedom. If even a health emergency couldn't make me a priority, maybe it was finally time to stop chasing what they would never give. Maybe this collapse was the start of a different kind of life. Before I go on, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like the invisible one in your own family? If you understand what it feels like to be overshadowed, comment below and share your story. I promise you your voice matters here, even if it didn't matter at home. And if you want to hear how I faced what came next, make sure you subscribe and stay until the end, because the real twist was still ahead. That hospital bed became my reckoning. No more excuses, no more waiting for the people who would never show up. For the first time, I let myself feel the full weight of being abandoned and the first flicker of what it might mean to finally set myself free. When I tell people about my childhood, they often picture something out of a postcard. A white colonial house with green shutters, a yard where we played catch, summer trips to Cape Cod. On the surface, we were a picture of middle-class American success. Neighbors admired us. Teachers spoke warmly of my parents. Friends came over and envied the perfect family I seemed to have. But the truth behind those walls was a story I could never explain in photos. The truth was that I grew up in a home where love was measured, weighed, and distributed unevenly. Caroline, my sister, received the lion's share of attention, pride, and opportunity. I received silence. At dinner, my father wore tailored suits, even at home, a man obsessed with appearances. He often asked me what my grades were, but his eyes would drift back to Caroline before I finished answering. My mother, patient and creative in her classroom, rarely extended that patience to me. If Caroline had an A+, why couldn't I? If she excelled at leadership, why was I quieter? It didn't matter that I worked hard. It only mattered that I never quite measured up. That constant comparison carved into me a sense of invisibility. Imagine speaking, but having no one truly listen. Imagine holding up your achievements only to have them brushed aside as not quite enough. Every child craves recognition, but I learned early on that recognition was reserved for someone else. The irony was that Caroline never seemed cruel. She didn't need to be. She thrived under their spotlight, unaware or unwilling to acknowledge that the same light cast me into shadow. She was praised for her flawless appearance, her sharp mind, her steady rise. I was Daniel, the other one. That title followed me through adolescence like a chain. I remember once painting a large canvas for an art competition. I poured myself into it, working nights until my fingers cramped. I placed second at regionals, a victory I thought might finally earn praise. My parents came, yes, but they spent the afternoon reminiscing about Caroline's first place win 3 years earlier. My work hung on the wall, ignored as if it were decoration instead of expression. That was the rhythm of my life, small victories, muted by the echo of her triumphs. Even moments meant to belong solely to me were claimed by her shadow. At my high school graduation, I looked into the crowd, hoping to see their eyes on me. They smiled, yes, but dinner afterward turned into a celebration of Caroline's engagement. My achievement, 4 years of hard work, was reduced to a line item, a pause between stories about her fiancé's wealthy family, and yet I smiled through it all. I learned to hide the hurt, to make jokes at my own expense, to play the role of the overlooked sibling, because it seemed easier than demanding recognition I knew I wouldn't receive. But deep down, each slight added weight to a growing burden. The more they ignored me, the harder I pushed myself. Maybe if I just worked more, achieved more, I would matter. That illusion shattered the day I collapsed at work. In that sterile hospital room, it all came rushing back. Every ignored birthday, every dismissed accomplishment, every time I was told to try harder while my sister's success was held as the standard. Lying there, I realized my body had finally done what my voice never could. It forced me to stop. People often assume a family that looks polished must be loving. But I learned the most dangerous neglect is the kind that hides behind polite smiles and perfect photographs. It teaches you to doubt your own worth because on paper nothing looks wrong. That was the prison I grew up in, and the bars were invisible to everyone but me. Before I move forward, I want to ask you something. Have you ever looked at a photo of your family and realized the picture-perfect smiles didn't match the truth inside? If you have, share your thoughts in the comments. Your story matters here, even if it was ignored at home. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what came next, because the cracks in that perfect family facade were only beginning to widen. That was my family, perfect from the outside, painfully broken on the inside. And I was the one left holding the silence. I used to wonder what it would feel like to be seen, not just glanced at, not just tolerated, but truly seen for who I was. The truth is, I never knew that feeling inside my own home. From as early as I can remember, I was the background character in a story that was supposed to be mine too. Caroline was the star, and I was the afterthought. It wasn't that I was failing. I worked hard in school, I earned strong grades, I built projects I was proud of. But every time I presented something, it was met with the same response. That's good, Daniel. But look at what Caroline did. If she scored perfect, my near perfect didn't matter. If she won first place, my second was invisible. If she stood in the spotlight, I was left to the shadows. That constant cycle wore on me. I stopped bringing home my drawings from art class because I knew they would collect dust on the counter, while Caroline's trophies filled the shelves. I stopped mentioning debate tournaments because dinner conversation always drifted back to her student council meetings. Even when teachers praised me, my parents would nod politely, then add, "His sister never had those problems." Imagine being 16 and realizing your milestones are footnotes in someone else's biography. That was my reality. The sting was sharpest on moments that should have been mine. Birthdays, graduations, achievements, they were all opportunities to compare me against Caroline. She didn't even have to boast. My parents did it for her. I still remember sitting across from them at parent-teacher conferences. I was right there in the chair, listening as my mother told my math teacher that I just needed to try harder. Her voice was gentle, but the words cut like glass. Caroline never had this problem. That sentence became the soundtrack of my adolescence. No matter what I did, it was filtered through the question, why aren't you like her? Over time, I started believing them. Maybe I really wasn't enough. Maybe I was destined to be the lesser one. So I buried myself in effort. I stayed up late chasing grades, chasing validation, chasing any scrap of recognition that might fall from their table. But scraps were all I ever got. The cruelest part was that Caroline wasn't cruel. She never told me I was worthless. She didn't have to. The imbalance of attention did the work for her. She basked in the glow while I learned to live in the shadow, telling myself it didn't hurt, even when it did. Lying in that hospital bed years later, those memories returned like ghosts. Every ignored victory, every dismissed effort, they all converged into one truth. I had spent my life trying to be seen by people who never wanted to look. That collapse wasn't just physical. It was the collapse of an illusion that if I tried hard enough, they would finally love me equally. And I want to pause here because maybe this sounds familiar to you. If you've ever felt like the invisible one in your family, always compared, never enough, I want you to know you are not alone. Leave a comment if this resonates with you, because your story deserves to be heard. Back then, I didn't have the courage to speak up. I smiled, I laughed, I played my part. But inside, I carried a question that gnawed at me for years. What would it feel like to be chosen just once without condition, without comparison? I wouldn't find the answer in that house. I would only find silence. And silence, I learned, can be the loudest sound in the world. There are moments in life that carve themselves so deeply into your memory, you can still feel them years later. For me, one of those moments was my 16th birthday. It should have been a milestone, the kind of day where a teenager feels celebrated, noticed, maybe even loved a little more than usual. Instead, it became the clearest proof that I was never a priority. That weekend, my sister Caroline had her college sorority formal. My parents packed their bags, drove 6 hours to help her prepare, and left me behind. On the kitchen counter sat a store-bought cake with cheap frosting and a note scribbled in my mother's rushed handwriting. "We'll celebrate next week. Love, Mom and Dad." Next week never came. There was no belated party, no apology, just silence. And that silence told me everything I needed to know. After that, I stopped expecting them to show up. High school graduation should have been different. I thought maybe finally the spotlight would fall on me. They came cameras ready cheering when my name was called. But at the dinner afterward, my father raised a glass, not to me, but to Caroline's engagement. He went on about her fiancé's wealthy family, about the bright future ahead of them. My acceptance letter to Northwestern was brushed aside with a single comment. "It's far from home, but at least it's a decent school." I sat there smiling tightly, my diploma still warm in its folder, invisible once again. By then I had learned a hard lesson, and my family milestones were not mine to own. They were opportunities to measure me against Caroline and remind me I had fallen short. My 16th birthday, my graduation, even small moments like when my art piece won second place at a regional competition were hijacked by comparisons to Caroline's past first-place trophy. Looking back now, I realize those wounds were deeper than I admitted. At the time, I told myself it didn't matter. I pretended not to care. But those moments built the foundation of a truth I carried into adulthood. I would always be second best in their eyes. And carrying that truth shaped everything I did. That's why when the hospital doctor told me my parents had been called and didn't come, I wasn't even surprised. I was hurt, yes, but surprised, no. It was just another entry on a long list of times they had chosen her over me, or simply chosen not to see me at all. Sitting here telling you this, I can't help but wonder how many of you have lived something similar. Have you ever had a moment that was supposed to be yours, only to have it stolen or ignored? If you have, share it in the comments. I promise you, your story won't be overlooked here the way it might have been at home. I used to dream about what it would feel like if just once they had said, "We are proud of you, Daniel." Not proud with conditions, not proud with comparisons, but proud of me as I was. That dream never came true in my teenage years, and the emptiness of those broken moments pushed me further away from them with every passing year. By the time I left for Northwestern, I wasn't just leaving home. I was escaping a cycle of neglect disguised as love. I thought distance might heal it. I thought building my own life might finally free me from the weight of being invisible. But what I didn't realize was that scars don't vanish just because you change your address. They stay waiting for the right moment to remind you that they were always there. And mine would resurface years later in that hospital room when I discovered that even in crisis, some people simply will never show up for you. When I packed my bags for Northwestern, it wasn't just about chasing an education. It was about running. Running from a house where I never belonged, from the constant comparisons, from the ache of being invisible in my own family. Chicago was not just another city. It was my chance to finally breathe, to write my story, without Caroline's shadow blotting out the page. I remember stepping off the plane that first day. The city air was sharp, filled with noise and possibility. For the first time, I felt anonymous, and in that anonymity, free. No one looked at me and thought Caroline's brother. No one asked if I could measure up. I was just Daniel, a kid with potential, a blank slate. College gave me something my childhood never did, a sense of self not defined by comparison. I built friendships. I found professors who noticed my work. I studied hard, yes, but not to chase someone else's approval. At least that's what I told myself. In truth, a part of me still longed for that validation, still imagined my parents' pride when I achieved something great. But distance gave me a shield. When the phone calls came short and obligatory, I could hang up and step into a world that valued me on my own terms. After graduation, I stayed in Chicago. I found work at a marketing agency and climbed quickly, not because anyone pushed me, but because I pushed myself. My apartment in Wicker Park was small, but it was mine. I decorated it with artwork from local artists' pieces that reminded me of the creativity I had once hidden in my parents' house. For the first time, I felt like I was building something that belonged to me alone. But the further I built my new life, the more the old one tried to pull me back. Holiday calls were filled with updates about Caroline's children, her new house, her picture-perfect family dinners. My achievements, promotions, campaigns, recognition in the firm barely warranted a, "That's nice." My mother would sigh and ask when I planned to settle down. My father would ask if I ever thought about moving back closer to Boston. They never said the words, but I could hear the subtext Caroline had given them, everything they wanted. I was just filling space. I can't describe the mix of freedom and ache those years gave me. On one hand, I was finally living my own life. On the other, I still carried the hollow weight of knowing that no matter what I built, it would never matter to them. I sent Christmas gifts that were rarely acknowledged. I made calls on birthdays that ended quickly rushed, as if my voice was a chore. The silence between us grew, but I told myself it was healthy. Distance was peace, even if it was lonely peace. Still, there were nights I stared at the ceiling and wondered if I collapsed, if I truly needed them, would they come? That question haunted me. And years later, lying in a hospital bed with machines beeping around me, I received the answer I always feared. No, they would not. Before I move on, let me ask you something. Have you ever built a life far from home, only to feel the ghosts of your family pulling at you even from miles away? If that resonates, share it below. I want to know how you broke free, or if you're still fighting too. Chicago gave me freedom, yes. But it also gave me clarity. I learned that you can change your address, your career, your entire world. But unless you face the wounds left behind, they follow you everywhere. I thought I had escaped. But escape isn't the same as healing. And soon, the weight I carried would come crashing down, literally, when my body finally gave in. In Chicago, I poured everything I had into work. If I couldn't earn love from my family, maybe I could earn respect from the world. That was the bargain I made with myself. So I became the first to arrive at the office and the last to leave. My life revolved around deadlines, presentations, and client wins. Every promotion, every project completed ahead of schedule felt like a bandage covering wounds I never allowed myself to inspect. My boss noticed. "Daniel is our workhorse," he would say with a chuckle during meetings. No wife, no kids, just projects. Everyone laughed, even me. But inside the words stung. It wasn't that I didn't want more from life, I just didn't know how to have it. My worth had always been measured in output. So I kept producing, even if it cost me sleep, health, and balance. The warning signs came quietly at first. Headaches that wouldn't fade, circles under my eyes that concealer couldn't hide. Nights spent staring at the ceiling while my mind refused to shut down. Friends at the office urged me to slow down. "You need a vacation," Olivia said once over lunch. She was a junior copywriter new to the company, but already the closest thing I had to a confidant. I laughed her off. There was always another campaign, another deadline. I didn't have time for rest. Then came the North Star account, a massive athletic brand eager to reinvent itself. The CEO had specifically requested me to lead the rebranding project. My boss hinted openly that success would mean a promotion to director my own team, a higher salary, recognition on a level I'd never had before. This was supposed to be my crowning achievement, the account that would finally prove once and for all that I was not second best. So I dove in headfirst. 16-hour days, meals skipped, coffee replacing sleep. I ignored the headaches even when they grew so sharp I needed prescription medication just to function. My vision blurred sometimes when I stared at the screen, but I pushed through. "It's just eye strain," I told myself. "I can handle it." I had been handling it my whole life. The morning of the presentation, I woke with pain, like a vice clamped around my skull. The dim light of dawn felt unbearable. I doubled my medication, showered in scalding water, and dressed in my sharpest suit, determined to push through one more time. Olivia took one look at me when I arrived at the office and whispered, "You look awful. Are you sure you're okay?" I brushed her concern aside. "It's nerves," I lied. "This account is huge." At 10 sharp, the executives filled the conference room. My boss introduced me, his voice smooth and confident. I began my pitch. For 15 minutes, I felt steady enough moving through slides I knew by heart. Then the room shifted. The walls tilted, the faces blurred together like melting wax. I gripped the table, my voice faltering. I tried to steady myself to focus on the demographic analysis on the screen, but the pain behind my right eye blazed like fire. I remember reaching for my water glass, hearing someone call my name with growing alarm. Then my legs gave out, and the world vanished. That collapse was not just exhaustion. It was my body screaming what my heart had known for years, that I could not keep carrying the weight of invisibility, of striving, of trying to prove my worth to people who would never care. And I want to pause here. Have you ever pushed yourself so hard, trying to prove something to the world, that your body finally said enough? If so, let me know in the comments, because you're not alone in that fight. That day was supposed to be my victory. Instead, it became the day I learned how fragile even the strongest facade can be. And as I lay in that hospital bed fighting to process what had happened, I didn't yet know the cruelest betrayal was still waiting. When I woke up in the hospital, I couldn't tell if hours or days had passed. The ceiling above me was blank white, the fluorescent lights humming faintly. My mouth felt like cotton, my body heavy. A nurse adjusted the IV in my arm and said softly, "You collapsed at work. Your colleague came with you in the ambulance, but she had to return to the office. She'll be back later." I blinked, trying to piece it together. The North Star presentation, the room spinning Olivia's face, then nothing. Now here I was, wired to machine's heart still pounding from something I didn't understand. Moments later, a doctor walked in, a woman with sharp but kind eyes. She introduced herself as Dr. Chen. "You collapsed due to severe exhaustion and dehydration, but we're concerned there may be underlying causes. We'll be running more tests." Her words cut through me like cold steel. Underlying causes. I wanted to protest, to say I couldn't stay. I had work deadlines, clients waiting. "When can I leave?" I croaked. She shook her head. "Not anytime soon. Your body is telling you something important and you need to listen." Then came the blow that shattered me more than any medical diagnosis could. "We called your emergency contacts, your parents. They said they would come, but they never arrived." She didn't have to explain further. I already knew. Lying there, I felt something inside me fracture. It wasn't just that they didn't come. It was the confirmation of everything I had feared my whole life. If a health crisis couldn't bring them to my side, nothing ever would. I wasn't just invisible, I was disposable. When Olivia returned that evening, she carried a tote bag with pajamas, toiletries, even a book from my nightstand. "I used the spare key you gave me," she said sheepishly. That small act of kindness undid me. Here was someone I had known only a few months, showing more care than the people who had raised me. "Have my parents called?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Olivia hesitated, then looked away. Not that I heard. Her silence told me everything. Boston was only a short flight away. They could have been there in hours, but they chose not to. That night I lay in bed, fear clawing at my chest. Dr. Chen returned with another physician, Dr. Patel, a neurologist. Their faces were grave. They wanted to run an MRI. They were concerned about intracranial pressure. The words sounded clinical, but what they meant was terrifying. Something inside my head might be growing, pressing, threatening. I nodded numbly, my throat too tight to speak. They left, and I stared at the silent phone on my bedside table. No calls, no messages. Just the steady reminder that the people who should have been my anchors had chosen amusement parks and family dinners over me. The loneliness was unbearable. And yet, in that void, small rays of light appeared. The nurse on the night shift, Jennifer, pulled up a chair and talked to me about her cats, her favorite podcasts, her sister's botched haircut. Ordinary stories meant to distract. She didn't have to, but she did. And that was when I realized something profound. Sometimes family isn't about blood. Sometimes family is about who shows up when you're lying in a hospital bed, terrified and alone. I want to stop here and ask you something. Have you ever been abandoned by the very people who were supposed to stand by you? If that question stings, then you know how it felt for me. Tell me in the comments. I read them all because your story deserves to be heard. That night, as the machines beeped steadily and the walls seemed to close in, I understood something. My collapse was no longer just physical. It was emotional, spiritual. And the next morning, when the MRI results came back, the truth would be even harder to face. The next morning, the hum of hospital life surrounded me. Nurses shuffled in and out, checking vitals, adjusting medication. I stared at the silent phone on the bedside table, hoping against reason that it might ring with a call from Boston. But it never did. When Dr. Chen and Dr. Patel entered together, their serious faces told me everything before they spoke. Dr. Patel said gently, "We've reviewed your MRI. We found a mass in your right frontal lobe." He turned his tablet toward me, showing an image where a white blur glowed against the dark background of my brain. "It appears to be a meningioma, a tumor." The word hit me like a hammer. Tumor. I had feared it, whispered it in the dark of my mind when the headaches started months ago, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real. "Is it cancer?" I managed to ask. Dr. Chen leaned forward. "Most meningiomas are benign, but the size and location of yours is causing significant pressure. That explains your collapse. It needs to be surgically removed." Surgery, brain surgery. My pulse thundered in my ears. I thought of the presentation I had been giving when I fell, the clients waiting for results, the deadlines I had obsessed over. All of it felt absurd now. None of it mattered if I didn't make it through this. "Is there someone we can call for you?" Dr. Chen asked softly. "Family, friends." I swallowed hard, the image of my parents at Six Flags flashing into my mind. My sister's caption, "Family Day without the drama," burned behind my eyes. I shook my head. "No," I said firmly. "There's no one who needs to be contacted." They promised to return with more details about the procedure, then left me alone with my thoughts. I buried my face in my hands, tears spilling through my fingers. At 29, I was about to face brain surgery, and the only people who should have cared had made it clear I was nothing more than an inconvenience. It was Jennifer, the night nurse, who found me like that. She sat on the edge of my bed and listened as I poured out everything: the diagnosis, the family photo, the years of being forgotten. When I finally fell silent, she touched my arm. "Sometimes the family we're born into fails us," she said, softly. "But the family we find along the way can be stronger than blood." Her words echoed in me. I thought of Olivia, who had brought me pajamas and my favorite book. I thought of Jennifer herself talking to me about cats and podcasts when she could have walked past my room. These weren't people bound to me by obligation. They were choosing to care. And maybe, just maybe, that mattered more than DNA. But still the fear clawed at me. Brain surgery, the risk, the unknown, the recovery, it all loomed ahead like a storm I couldn't avoid. For the first time in years, I admitted to myself that I was terrified, not just of dying, but of dying unseen, with no one to remember me as more than Carolyn's brother. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to leave you with this thought. What would you do if the people you expected to stand by you never showed up? Would you keep chasing their approval, or would you let go and build a new family from those who truly choose you? Think about that. Leave your answer below and make sure you subscribe, because what came next changed everything. That open question haunted me in the hours that followed. Surgery loomed, my body was fragile, my heart was heavier than ever. And as the sun set behind the hospital windows, I realized the real story was no longer about survival alone. It was about deciding what family truly meant, and whether I had the strength to redefine it for myself. The hours after the diagnosis stretched into eternity. I lay in that bed staring at the ceiling, hearing the soft shuffle of nurses' shoes and the distant hum of monitors down the hall. My mind kept replaying Dr. Patel's words. "It needs to be surgically removed. A mass in my brain. Surgery, recovery, risks." Those words had weight, and the more I thought about them, the heavier they became. I tried to picture myself on an operating table. Strangers standing over me with scalpels, machines keeping me alive while they cut into the most delicate part of who I was, my mind. It felt surreal. At 29, you don't imagine your life being defined by whether or not brain surgery is successful. You imagine careers, relationships, adventures, not this. But what made it worse was the silence. My parents still hadn't called. My sister hadn't texted. The phone on my table might as well have been a brick. 3 days had passed since I collapsed, and in that time, my family managed to go to an amusement park together. They even tagged me in a photo to emphasize my absence. Family day without the drama. Those words cut deeper than the tumor pressing against my skull. When I scrolled through the pictures, my chest tightened. My father carrying my nephew on his shoulders. My mother laughing while helping my niece with cotton candy. Caroline and her husband smiling in front of a roller coaster. Everyone looked so whole, so happy, so complete without me. It wasn't just that they ignored me, they celebrated it. That night I broke. For years I had been carrying the belief that if something serious happened, they would show up. That if my life was on the line, they would push aside their preferences and be there. Now I knew the truth. Even a brain tumor wasn't enough to make me a priority. The next morning, Dr. Chen came in to explain the surgical plan. They would open my skull, remove the tumor, and close me back up. It would take hours. Recovery would be grueling. But the prognosis was good if everything went smoothly. "We recommend doing this within the week," she said firmly. I nodded, numb. When she left, I whispered the words out loud, almost testing them. Brain surgery, alone. Hearing it made it real in a way nothing else had. Later, Olivia came back. She had taken time off work, her arms full of magazines, snacks, and even a small plant. She tried to joke, tried to lighten the mood. But when she saw the tears in my eyes, her smile faltered. I told her about the tumor, about the surgery, about the photo my sister had posted. She didn't interrupt. She just listened. When I finished, she said quietly, "Then let me be your family right now." I wanted to protest, to tell her she didn't have to, but the truth was, I needed her. I needed someone to look at me and not see an obligation, not see a burden, but simply choose to stay. And in that moment, Olivia did. Jennifer, the night nurse, added to that circle of unexpected family. She came in after her rounds and told me stories about surviving breast cancer alone, about how she built a new kind of family from friends, neighbors, co-workers. She told me I wasn't weak for needing people. I was human. It was strange. The people who had known me for months, even days, showed up in ways my parents never had in 29 years. And as surgery loomed closer, I realized something profound. Blood makes you related, but showing up makes you family. Before we move forward, let me pause. Think about your own life. Who shows up when it matters most? Who answers the phone when you call at midnight? That's your real family. If you believe in that truth, subscribe and share this story, because the twist that came next proved it beyond doubt. I signed the consent forms the following morning. My hand trembled as I wrote my name. 5 hours on an operating table, my life in the hands of surgeons with no parents waiting outside, no sister holding my hand. Just Olivia, just Jennifer, just the strangers who chose to care. And strangely, I realized that might be enough. The days leading up to surgery blurred together, each one a mixture of fear, exhaustion, and small mercies. Every morning, doctors checked my vitals and reminded me of the risks. Every evening, silence from Boston reminded me of the truth: I would be doing this without my family. But not without a family. Olivia became a constant presence. She brought her laptop and sat by my bed working on small assignments while keeping me company. She teased me about the hospital food, read passages aloud from a novel I'd been meaning to start, and insisted on beating me at chess on her tablet. Her determination to treat me like more than a patient gave me a lifeline. For a few hours each day, I wasn't a man facing brain surgery, I was just Daniel, her friend. Jennifer, my night nurse, filled the other half of that circle. She checked my vitals with the precision of a professional, but always lingered to talk. She shared stories about her cats and neighbors, but also about her battle with breast cancer years earlier. I went through it alone. She told me one night, her voice softer than usual, but I wasn't really alone. Strangers became family. People I barely knew showed up. That's how I survived. Her words settled deep into me. It wasn't weakness to need people. It was humanity. For the first time, I stopped feeling ashamed of the hole my parents had left. Maybe that hole could be filled by others who chose to care. The night before surgery, Olivia came with a small duffel bag. "I cleared tomorrow with my boss," she announced, her tone firm. "I'll be here before they wheel you in, and I'll be here when you wake up." She filled the silence that followed with a forced smile. Besides, someone has to water your plant and feed your sourdough starter while you're gone. I laughed for the first time in days, and then she said something that nearly undid me. When a hospital volunteer came by with paperwork, Olivia took the clipboard from my trembling hands. Under next of kin, she wrote her own name. You don't have to, I began, but she cut me off. Obviously, I do. Someone has to stand where your family should be, and if that means me, so be it. The weight of that moment pressed against the years of absence I'd endured. A woman I'd known for only months was doing what my parents wouldn't, choosing me. Later that night, Jennifer slipped me a folded piece of paper. On it were names and room numbers of other patients who had gone through similar surgeries or were facing them alone just like me. Sometimes she said talking to people who get it helps more than anything. I spent the next 2 hours visiting those rooms. A retired teacher recovering from the same surgery, a young mother battling lymphoma, a college student disowned by his parents, a stroke survivor, a father of 3 who survived a car accident. Each of them carried scars, but each of them radiated strength. And as I listened, I felt something shift inside me. I was no longer just a man abandoned by his family. I was part of a community of survivors, people who had learned the same lesson I was just beginning to understand: family is who shows up. That night, I slept better than I had since arriving at the hospital. The fear hadn't disappeared, but it was surrounded by something stronger: connection. And I want to pause here because this is important. Think about the people who choose you. The ones who stay when it's inconvenient, who care when they don't have to. That's your family. If you believe in that kind of family, share this video, subscribe, and stay with me, because tomorrow morning everything would come to a head. When dawn came, I wasn't ready, but I wasn't alone. Olivia was already there, smiling nervously, holding my hand as the orderly arrived to wheel me toward the operating room. Jennifer met us in the hall, squeezing my shoulder as I passed. Their presence didn't erase my fear, but it reminded me of something I hadn't felt in years: I mattered. And sometimes knowing you matter is enough to face the impossible. The morning of the surgery arrived with a strange stillness. The sun barely pushed through the hospital blinds, casting thin lines of light across the floor. I had signed the papers, the consent form, with Olivia's name scrawled in the emergency contact section, stared back at me from the table. It felt surreal. My parents had been called, my sister had been tagged in photos, but it was Olivia, someone who had only known me for months, who had chosen to stand in that space for me. The orderly arrived with a wheelchair. Olivia squeezed my hand, her smile trembling as she whispered, "You've got this, and you've got me. That's enough." I nodded, though my throat tightened around words I couldn't form. They wheeled me down the hallway, Jennifer intercepting us, just before the double doors of the surgical wing. She pressed a hand to my shoulder. "I'll be here when you wake up," she said, simply, as if it were the most natural promise in the world. Inside the operating room, the cold reality hit. The lights were blinding the air sharp with antiseptic. Machines beeped steadily, waiting for the moment when they would be responsible for keeping me alive. The anesthesiologist leaned over, asking me to count backward from 10. I barely made it to 7 before the world disappeared. What followed was not the clean fade-to-black movies show. Waking from brain surgery is a fog, a world of pain and disorientation. Voices floated around me, fragmented. Words like stable, responsive, good signs reached me through the haze. My body felt heavy, my head bandaged tight, but slowly, awareness returned. And when I opened my eyes fully, the first face I saw was Olivia's. She sat at my bedside, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion, but her smile soft and steady. "Hey there," she whispered. "Surgery went great. Tumor's gone. You're going to be fine." Relief surged through me so powerfully that tears spilled before I could stop them. She offered me an ice chip, her hand steady when mine trembled. Jennifer appeared next, slipping in during her break. "Told you I'd be here," she said, her grin warm and grounding. And behind them, flowers sent by patients I had visited the night before surgery, people I barely knew, but who had understood my fear better than anyone in my blood family ever could. 3 days passed in the ICU, a blur of pain medication, cautious optimism, and brief visits from nurses and doctors. Olivia was there daily, reading me updates from work, laughing about office gossip, pretending life was normal. Jennifer stopped by every shift, her presence a comfort, even when she only had minutes to spare. Together, They became the family I didn't know I needed, the anchors that kept me from drowning in fear. When Dr. Patel finally told me the tumor was gone, benign, and my recovery was expected to be complete, I felt a weight lift that I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. For years, I had been bracing under invisible pressure, first from my family's neglect, then from the physical pain I had ignored. Now, for the first time, I felt the possibility of freedom. And yet in the quiet moments, something gnawed at me. My phone, ignored on the table, began buzzing with missed calls and messages. 17 from my father, 22 from my mother, more than 24 from Caroline. After a week of silence, suddenly they wanted me. The reason came in a text from my father. "Your grandfather had a stroke. He's asking for you. Call us." The irony twisted inside me. I had faced brain surgery alone while they enjoyed roller coasters and cotton candy, and now, suddenly, they needed me. Before I take you into that confrontation, I want to ask you something. What would you do if the people who abandoned you during your darkest hour suddenly begged for your presence when they were in crisis? Would you answer, or would you finally walk away? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear how you would handle it. I stared at the messages, my hands shaking. My grandfather was the only one who had ever made me feel seen, and now he might be dying asking for me. I didn't know how to reconcile the anger burning in my chest with the love I still carried for him. All I knew was that the next choice would change everything. When the nurse handed me my phone and I finally read the flood of messages, my chest tightened. 17 missed calls from my father, 22 from my mother, 26 from Caroline. The irony was suffocating. For nearly a week, my phone had been silent. No texts, no voicemails, not even a simple, "Are you okay?" while I faced brain surgery alone. And now suddenly, they couldn't stop calling. The reason came in a blunt text from my father. "Your grandfather had a stroke. Doctors say he might not make it. He's asking for you. Call us." My grandfather, the one person in my family who had always made me feel seen. He was the man who taught me to fish at dawn, who sat proudly at my high school art show when my parents skipped it, who mailed me birthday cards with handwritten notes even after I moved to Chicago. He was the proof that love in my family could exist. It just hadn't come from my parents. Tears stung my eyes as memories flooded in. Grandpa Howard, smiling beside me on the dock at Crystal Lake. His voice calling me Danny Boy, telling me I was strong, capable, worthy. If anyone deserved my presence now, it was him. But the cruel reality was that I had just come out of brain surgery. Traveling wasn't just dangerous, it was impossible. Jennifer found me staring at the phone, my hands shaking. "What's wrong? Are you in pain?" she asked. Wordlessly, I handed her the screen. She read the messages and sighed. "Family emergencies have interesting timing, don't they?" "I need to see him," I whispered. "But I can't. The doctor said travel isn't safe. How do I say goodbye like this?" Dr. Patel confirmed my worst fear. "You cannot travel, Daniel. Not by plane, not by long car rides. The risks are too great: bleeding, seizures, infection." "I'm sorry." His words were final. I couldn't go. Olivia, standing at my bedside, touched my arm. "Then call them back. At least talk to him. He deserves that." I hesitated, staring at the silent phone. Did I really want to hear my parents' voices after their betrayal? Did I want to open myself up to more disappointment? But then I remembered my grandfather's smile, his steady voice telling me I mattered. He deserved better than silence. So with Olivia and Jennifer standing beside me like guards at my flank, I dialed my father's number. He answered immediately. "Daniel, where have you been? We've been trying to reach you for days." No hello, no concern, just accusation. "I've been in the hospital, Dad," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "I collapsed at work. Brain tumor. I had surgery 4 days ago." Silence, a long, heavy silence. Then his voice subdued for the first time in my memory. "Are you serious? Why didn't you tell us?" "The hospital called you." I snapped, my anger finally boiling over. "You said you were coming, but you went to Six Flags instead. You tagged me in photos while I was lying here waiting to hear if I had cancer." Another pause. "We didn't think it was that serious," he muttered. "They said exhaustion, dehydration. And you didn't think to check back, to call the hospital again? To call me?" My voice cracked. I went into brain surgery alone. Do you have any idea what that felt like? On the other end, I heard something I never expected, my father's voice breaking. "We should have been there. I'm sorry." The apology felt hollow. Too little, too late. But before I could respond, I forced the subject back to the one person who mattered. How's Grandpa? Not good, he admitted. Major stroke. He's conscious but weak. He's asking for you. I swallowed hard. I can't travel. Doctor's orders. But set up a video call. I need to see him. And so for the first time in years, my parents and I agreed on something. Before I take you into that call, I want you to sit with this. What would you do if you had one last chance to speak to the only person who ever saw your worth? Would you take it even if it meant facing the people who broke you? Think about it. Leave your thoughts below, because that video call would become the turning point of everything that came next. The video call came 3 hours later. Olivia sat beside me, her hand steady on mine, while Jennifer hovered near the door, just in case my emotions tipped into panic. My phone vibrated, and when I answered, the screen showed a hospital room 2 states away. My father adjusted the camera, my mother hovered nearby, and Caroline lingered at the edge of the frame. But none of them mattered. Grandpa, I whispered. The camera shifted, and there he was, frail, thinner than I had ever seen him, his skin pale against the stark white sheets. But when his eyes opened and focused on me, they lit up like they always had. Danny boy, he slurred, his voice weak but full of warmth. There you are. Tears blurred my vision. I tried to angle the phone to hide the bandage wrapped around my head, but his sharp gaze caught it immediately. What happened to you? Just a little surgery, I said, forcing a smile. Nothing to worry about. He chuckled faintly, the sound more air than laughter. Liar. Your father told me. Brain tumor. My brave boy. His concern, even in his state, pierced straight through me. I'm okay, Grandpa. The doctors say I'll recover. Good. That's good. He closed his eyes for a moment, then forced them open again. His hand trembled as he reached toward the camera. Listen to me, Danny boy. The lake house, it's yours. I already signed the papers. I froze. What, no, Grandpa, you don't have to. Already done, he interrupted, his voice suddenly sharp despite his frailty. That place was always yours, always your sanctuary. Take care of it. No one else will. His eyes softened. And one more thing. Stop running. My heart clenched. What do you mean? From them, he said, his gaze flicking toward where my parents sat just out of frame. Talk to them. Make them hear you. Then decide. Running only keeps the hurt alive. The weight of his words sank deep. I had spent years building a life away from Boston, away from their comparisons, away from the pain. But I had never confronted them, never spoken my truth. And now here was the man who had always seen me, urging me to stand my ground. I will, I promised, my voice breaking. I'll try. Not someday. Now, he said firmly. No time like now. His eyes fluttered shut, exhaustion overtaking him. Love you, Danny boy. Always have. I love you too, Grandpa, I whispered, my tears finally spilling. When the camera shifted back, my father's face filled the screen. His eyes widened at the sight of my bandaged head. My God, Daniel. Brain surgery. Yes, I said flatly. Remember when the hospital called? Remember when you didn't come? He faltered. For the first time, the man who always had answers was silent. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, her first words not about my survival, but about my hair. Daniel, your beautiful hair. It'll grow back, I cut her off coldly, unlike my trust in you. Caroline pushed into the frame, her voice soft, her face carefully composed. If we had known it was serious, of course we would have come. Would you? I snapped. Because you knew I was in the hospital. You knew. And instead of calling, you posted photos about how much better life is without my drama. Do you know what it feels like to read that while waiting to hear if you have cancer? Her face reddened. I didn't mean it like that. Yes, you did. You've always been happiest when I wasn't there to ruin your perfect narrative. Congratulations, you got your wish. I faced the scariest moment of my life completely alone. The silence that followed was deafening. My father finally spoke, his voice low. We made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but we're your family. We love you. Do you? I asked quietly. Because love means showing up, and you never did. Before I could end the call, Olivia slipped back into the room, catching my eye as if to say, that was enough. You've said what needed to be said. And she was right. For the first time, I had spoken my truth. Not as Caroline's brother, not as the forgotten child, but as myself. Have you ever reached a point where you finally said the words you held in for years? That breaking point where silence was no longer an option. Tell me in the comments, I want to know how it changed you. That night, I turned off my phone and lay back in bed, exhausted but strangely free. For the first time in my life, I didn't crave their approval. I had told my truth, and whether they heard it or not no longer mattered. 6 months later, I found myself standing on the dock at Crystal Lake, watching the sunset spill across the water in molten gold. The cabin, now legally mine after Grandpa's passing, had become my sanctuary. Its wooden walls still smelled faintly of cedar, and the porch creaked under my feet, just as it had when I was a child. Every corner carried his presence, his fishing rods leaned in the shed, his old chess set resting on a shelf. The inheritance was more than property. It was a legacy of love from the only man who had ever made me feel enough. Recovery hadn't been easy. The headaches lingered, the scar itched, and therapy sessions tested my patience. But I was alive, and more than that, I was different. Brain surgery had removed more than a tumor. It had cut out the need to chase validation from those unwilling to give it. For the first time, I defined my worth on my own terms. My relationship with my parents was complicated. After the video call, they tried in clumsy ways to repair what they had broken. My father called more often, his tone awkward, but softened by something I hadn't heard before: hesitation. My mother sent flowers, her notes signed Love, Mom, and Dad, though the words still felt borrowed. Caroline deleted her cruel post and replaced it with a vague, "thinking of you" caption, tagging me as if that could erase years of neglect. None of it felt authentic. But I no longer needed it to. Olivia, on the other hand, became the sister I had always wanted. She visited on weekends, bringing laughter stories and a sense of belonging. Jennifer, though busy with night shifts, checked in with texts and coffee dates whenever possible. And the support group I had met in the hospital. They became my circle. Survivors, fighters, people who understood that showing up was the truest form of love. Standing there by the lake, I realized something profound. I had spent years running from my family, from their comparisons, from the wounds they left. But maybe running wasn't the answer. Maybe redefining was. Family wasn't about DNA. It was about presence, about choice, about the people who sat beside you in hospital rooms and promised, "You've got this." As twilight deepened, car doors slammed behind me and voices floated across the water. Olivia, Jennifer, members of my support group, my chosen family had arrived for the weekend gathering we now held monthly. They carried bags of food, laughter spilling before they even reached the porch. They came not because obligation demanded it, but because they wanted to. And that, I realized, was the deepest lesson of all. Family is not always who raises you. Family is who shows up when you collapse, who stays when it's inconvenient, who chooses you when you're at your weakest. I turned back toward the lake, the water catching the last light of day, and felt peace settle over me. For so long, I had believed love was something I had to earn, to fight for, to prove worthy of. But here, with my chosen family gathering behind me, I knew the truth. Love, freely given, is the only kind worth keeping. Before we close, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to redefine what family means? Have you built your own circle out of people who chose you when others didn't? If you have, share it in the comments. And if this story spoke to you, hit that subscribe button and stay with me. Because in my next story, I'll take you even deeper into the journey of finding freedom after betrayal. The wind rippled across the lake, carrying with it the echoes of my grandfather's voice. "Stop running." He was right. I wasn't running anymore. I was finally home. As I sit here tonight looking out across Crystal Lake, the reflection of the stars scattered on the water, I feel a sense of calm I never thought possible. For so many years, I believed peace could only come if my parents finally saw me, finally valued me. I waited. I worked. I sacrificed, hoping one day I would be enough for them. But peace didn't come from their approval. It came from letting go of the need for it. This cabin, with its creaking floors and quiet mornings, has become a symbol of that truth. My grandfather left it to me, not because I earned it, not because I fought for it, but because he always saw me for who I was. It is a reminder that even one voice of genuine love can anchor you through storms of neglect. My chosen family, the friends who sit on this porch with me, who bring laughter into my life without asking for anything in return, are proof that love is not limited by blood. Love is presence. Love is consistency. Love is someone holding your hand in a sterile hospital hallway, or sending you a message when you least expect it. If you're listening to this and carrying the ache of feeling invisible, I want you to know something. You are not alone. You are not defined by those who failed to show up. You are defined by your strength, your resilience, and the people who choose to walk beside you now. So stop waiting for the ones who never came. Start building with the ones who are here. That is the greatest freedom of all. And remember, you deserve a family that shows up, not one you have to beg to stay.